Oh, hi there. Chag Sameach. Hope you're having a great time at your Seder. Right? We're up to Karpas. Kadesh or Chatz Karpas, the third step in the Seder. You know, Karpas always feels like it just gets short shrift. I mean, look here. Karpas, nothing, one line, one blessing to say over the vegetable that we dip. But Karpas has so much more. This has so much meaning in it. So I'm Rabbi Ehud Sela, and I'm going to give you Rabbi Sela's top 10 things to think about while doing Karpas. Now, you don't have to do all of them at your Seder. In fact, I wouldn't recommend it because that means your Seder is probably going to last like the rabbinic Seder in Bnei Brak till next morning. But pick one for each night, and you can have lots of material to use for Seders in the future. So, Karpas, the green vegetable that we dip in the salt water. First, number one, it's supposed to remind us of spring. We have other symbols of spring on the Seder table. See if you can find them and explain what their connection to spring is. Number two, so it's supposed to remind us of spring, and in Hebrew we say Chag HaAviv. That's the holiday of spring. The word Aviv literally means new or green or fresh shoots. Those little things when the plant starts to just pop up out of the ground. So we say in English, spring has sprung, and in Hebrew, Aviv, the shoots literally pop out of the ground. Now, here in LA, where I live, Los Angeles, it feels like spring all the time. But I did plant a garden this year and was able to see the first shoots pop out of the ground just a week or two ago. It was very exciting. I grew up on the East Coast, and I really loved the transition from winter into spring. You could really tell the change of seasons, and there were special things about spring that I loved. So you can discuss what are the special things about spring that you really love and appreciate, especially if you're living in a cold weather climate and you finally get that transition. Number three, so Karpas again, spring, reminds us that Pesach has to be celebrated in the spring. You know, the lunar calendar only has 354 days. It's shorter than the solar calendar. So the Jewish calendar has to adjust every 2 or 3 years by adding a leap month so that we don't have our holidays fall behind, because we can't celebrate Pesach in the winter or in the fall or in the summer even. It has to be celebrated in the spring, so our calendar keeps adjusting. So it's really important for us to celebrate Pesach now. And according to the Midrash, God chose the spring specifically to bring the Israelites out of Egypt in order that it would be good weather for their journey. Because if it would be the winter, at night it would have been too cold. If it in the summer, it would have been too hot during the day. So Pesach has to be now. So you can discuss, why do you think Pesach has to be now in the spring? It can't be celebrated any other time of year. Or what other things have to be celebrated at certain times of the year, because in other times they just wouldn't make sense. All right, on to number four, the symbolism of the dipping. So we dip the karpas, the vegetables, into salt water. It reminds us of dippings that we do in the Passover story. There are 2 dippings at the Seder, and there are 2 dippings in the Passover story. Can you figure them out? I'll give you a chance to think, but I'll tell you right now. So obviously the first dipping is the karpas, the vegetable, into the salt water. The second dipping is the maror into the charoset. The 2 dippings in the Passover story. The first one is really, really, really early, the very kind of beginning, when Joseph's coat, when Joseph was thrown into the pit by his brothers, they took his coat of many colors and dipped it in blood to convince their father that he had been killed by some wild animal. The second dipping is at the very end of the Passover story, where the Israelites took some hyssop, a bunch of branches, dipped it in blood, again, and smeared it on the doorpost so that the angel of death would pass over their homes. Number 5. Did you know, in the land of Israel, those rabbis said you cannot eat after midday on the day before Passover. So you have lunch and then you can't have anything until the Seder. But then when they got to Karpas, they allowed you to have a really big spread because they figured you're probably really hungry. It wasn't just one vegetable, you could have a lot. In Babylonia, those rabbis said you could keep eating up until the Seder, but when they got to the dipping, they only would dip like one vegetable, figuring, well, you could have had a snack an hour before the Seder, you're not starving. So they didn't have a big spread. Number 6. So back in the land of Israel, where the Seder was first originated and described in the Mishnah, it was supposed to be modeled on the Greek or Roman symposium, where they would have a multi-course meal, and each course would actually be quite big. So again, the rabbis in the land of Israel allowed you to have a big karpas bounty. In my family, we do it up tremendous. We don't just dip one thing and don't just have parsley. We cut up cucumbers and carrots and green peppers and red peppers and yellow peppers and orange peppers. We even eat jicama, which we don't eat the rest of the year, but we cut it up. If you've never had jicama, it's a little bit bland, but it's very juicy, and it's a really great, refreshing thing to have. Parsley we have, green peas, whatever borei pri adama vegetable you got, we put it out there, and then we dip, not just in salt water. We put out like dressing, we put out eggplant dip. This past couple of years we've been eating kitniot, so we put out hummus. Because we're in California, of course, we have avocados, so I make a huge thing of guacamole, and we have a tremendous crudité buffet, and that makes everybody happy, and no one is starving during the Maggid section. And by the time we get to dinner, everyone's still already happy. Number 7. The Bach, not Johann Sebastian Bach, but the Bach, our main man, Rabbi Yoel Sirkis. So he said that having a big spread is important because it shows that you're taking care of people's needs during this part of the Seder. We know we're going to have a lot of talking during Maggid, and people are going to be uncomfortable if they're hungry. So we have a nice big spread, you're taking care of people's needs. We are much more aware nowadays of different people having different needs. So how else can we take care of people's needs at the Seder? And how else can we take care of people's needs and be sensitive to different people's needs all the time of the year, or different holidays, or in your home? Think about different situations. Different people have different needs. We have to be aware and sensitive and try and take care of them. Up to 8. Now we're going to talk about the idea about the dipping in the tears and how that symbolized the slavery. So, Karpas, if you spell it backwards, in Hebrew, is Samech Farech. Samech is the Hebrew letter that stands for the number 60, and Farech means hard labor. Now, if you take those two together, it means 60 kinds of hard labor. So according to one rabbi, the karpas is supposed to, in the salt water, is supposed to remind us of 60 kinds of difficult labor that the Egyptians imposed upon the Israelites when they were slaves. So can you name 60 kinds of difficult labor? Try and see how many you can get. You can also then have a discussion of what is hard labor today? What are the hardest jobs today? Is it physical labor? Is it mental labor? Is it creativity, ingenuity? What is the most difficult parts of any job, or what are the most difficult jobs that you can think of? Number 9. Now, karpas, a green vegetable, tastes good. It's maybe not necessarily sweet, but it's yummy, it's refreshing. And then we dip it in the salt water and we kind of like make it bad, although personally I actually like it when it tastes a little bit salty. The second dipping that we do is the maror, something bitter, and definitely into something sweet, the charoset. So the first dipping kind of is backwards. It's taking something good and making it supposedly a little bit bad, but the second dipping is supposed to be on the model of the Seder. The model of the Seder is to go from genut to shevach, from degradation to praise, to something wonderful. That's what the symbol of the maror into the charoset is, going from something bad to something good. So if we see the first dipping to the second dipping, we took something good, the spring, we made it a little bad because slavery, never good. But then we can take something bad, the bitterness of slavery, and make it good, charoset, with freedom. So remember that even if something good can be made bad, we can always fix it by taking that bad thing and making it good. That's the whole arc of the Seder, is going from genut to shevach, and the dippings help us think about that. Last one, number 10. So we're supposed to dip the karpas in salt water. Tears. It's supposed to remind us of the tears of the Israelites who were suffering in bondage. When do we cry? It's not just slaves that cry. Everybody cries. Now, those people who cry a lot, if we think about it, are most likely children. Kids are really in touch. When they're upset about something, they cry. As we get older, we don't cry just kind of on the drop of a hat when something just bothers us a little bit. We're kind of hold our emotions in. And even if you think about the way kids cry versus the way adults cry when they do cry. When kids cry, they just let it out and the tears roll down their face, and they actually let the tears get into their mouth and they can taste their tears. They taste the saltiness. As adults, we often just kind of wipe away our tears right away. We don't let it come down our face. Think about it as an adult. When was the last time you had a good cry? When was the last time you really let your emotions out? And then when was the last time you let the tears go all the way down your cheeks and into your mouth and actually tasted the saltiness of those tears? It's probably been a while, because unfortunately as adults, we don't seem to be in touch with that emotion. But crying's good. Crying is a great cathartic way to let out our sadness. So, especially this Seder, where I think there's a certain amount of sadness that we're thinking about because of the pandemic. There's terrible, terrible death around the world. There's just a lot of people whose lives are disrupted and are very difficult. A lot of us are just separated from our loved ones. Maybe we're watching together with them over Zoom or Skype or FaceTime or something like that for our Seders, but it's not the same as being in the room. There's sadness there, so I'm sure there's going to be tears. Let those tears out. If you're feeling sad, let those tears come. And let them roll down your cheek. Don't wipe them away right away. Let them roll down your cheek and into your mouth, and you will actually have a little sense of what it's really meant to taste our tears. I want to leave you with a poem, a blessing that I got from a Haggadah called The Blessing for Tears. Blessed are the tears, for they represent my freedom to feel. Blessed are the tears, for they indicate that I am self-aware. Blessed are the tears, for they prove to me that I have found myself. And blessed are the tears, for they are proof that I am alive. Have a wonderful Pesach, and it's on to the next step in the Seder. Yachatz. Chag Sameach.